Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Tyrell Gittens from the Copper Foundation. I currently coordinate the Cari-Bois Environmental News Network, and we are deeply appreciative to have everyone joining us this afternoon for our third A Guide to Natural Capital webinar. Um, when we launched this series in September, we really wanted to inspire and attendees of these webinars to learn more about how they could integrate values of natural capital into their business models, into their operations, to not only position them to be more sustainable, but also for them to be more aware of how data and information in regards to natural capital could be captured. Now that could also inform how they approach business, particularly reporting and biodiversity reporting, which is a focus of this series. So today's webinar is titled Partnerships for Nature. And what we really want to do this afternoon is foster a conversation amongst our panelists, as well as attendees, on how we could explore partnerships across different sectors to strengthen nature-related reporting and decision-making, how we could collaborate to unlock innovative finance models, and how we could truly reflect amongst ourselves on the role of multi-stakeholder partnerships in filling data gaps across the Caribbean, particularly as it relates to biodiversity reporting. And as everyone knows, we are in a process where countries around the world are aligning the MD to the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So of course, this is a whole of society approach will really be important to achieving those goals. And to get there, of course, we would want our stakeholders in the business field to contribute to those goals as well, and to understand how they are contributing to those goals. Of course, biodiversity reporting is incredibly important. So we have a powerful lineup of presenters this afternoon from many different organizations, as you can see here on the screen. So I'm going to introduce our first presenter, my colleague at the Cropper Foundation, Mr. Brandon Wavy. So Brandon is a development economist with 10 years of experience driving sustainability, climate finance, and resilient agriculture across the Caribbean. He specializes in transforming complex environmental and economic data into actionable strategies for inclusive development and ecological integrity. Brandon serves as a technical advisor to the Regional Task Force for Resilient Food Systems, the framers, for Climate Smart Agriculture Leaders Network, Learning Network, and he is a member of the Capitals Coalition Advisory Panel. He is an accredited training natural capital for business decision making and is a leads technical programs at the Cropper Foundation, which aims to advance agriculture development, biodiversity, finance, and sustainability reporting. He's guided by the philosophy that our economies are embedded in nature. So, Brandon, I'm going to kick the ball to you now.
I like a football reference. I must say that I do like football as well as a sport. So thank you so much for that generous introduction, Tyrell. Are you hearing me? You can give me a thumbs up there if that works. Yeah, great.
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you. So today I'm here to speak about why partnerships matter for nature-related reporting and for driving nature positive actions in the private sector. And when the opportunity came, I felt it was important that this message come from the Caribbean Natural Capital Hub itself. And as a co-lead and as the civil society representative within the hub, this topic really reflects the ethos of why we co-lead the hub in the first place. Partnerships. And when I'm talking about partnerships here, I'm talking about linking like-minded individuals for the progress of development is not just a component of our work, it's embedded in everything we do here at the Copper Foundation. So across the Caribbean, we're seeing a significant shift in how businesses understand and disclose their relationship with nature. As Tyrell explained, it is a global effort after all. But over the last few reporting cycles, several of our major national and even regional companies have been publishing increasingly detailed ESG and sustainability reports. And what I've seen emerging across these reports is a shared recognition that nature is now a material business issue and not just an environmental one. Companies are beginning to map ecological dependencies, identify biological related risks, and assess their exposure to climate and nature impacts across supply chains and operations. But these same reports also reveal a critical challenge, and that's no single company has all the data or tools or scientific knowledge or frameworks needed to confidently report on nature-related impacts and dependencies. Many companies signal gaps in baseline biodiversity data, limited access to ecological expertise, difficulty in aligning with global frameworks, and the need for external partners to strengthen the credibility of their disclosures. And this is exactly why partnerships matter. Partnerships allow Caribbean companies to access consistent science-based natural capital data, use shared and trusted methodologies for measurement, align reporting with emerging global standards like the TNFD and Tyrell, as you explained, the Global Biodiversity Framework, and specifically this is about Target 15. Strengthen transparency, credibility, and investor confidence, and build the internal capacity needed to become truly nature positive. So what we're seeing here is clear. Companies interestingly want to report on nature. They recognize the business value, but they can't do it alone. And they aren't doing it alone. The Caribbean Natural Capital Hub was created precisely to meet this need. I'm talking about bringing together NGOs, financial institutions, government agencies, researchers, and even civil society to help companies transition from good intentions to credible, actionable, and science-aligned nature-related disclosures. So for those of you who may not know of the Hub, it was launched in July 2022 through a partnership between Anson Merchant Bank and the Copper Foundation. It was established as the first platform in the region dedicated to embedding natural capital into private sector decision-making. The hub is also one of 18 global capitals coalition hubs, which is an international network for transforming how organizations value nature, people, and society in their decisions. From its inception, the hub was designed as a partnership ecosystem, bringing together finance, civil society, academia, government, and the private sector to advance natural capital approaches across the Caribbean. And we do that by leveraging what I like to call pillars of the hub. And these are like 4 thematic areas that organize and drive our work. The first is building, developing a Caribbean-ready knowledge base by testing and localizing global natural capital tools in partnership with, again, our partners, academia, regulators, and even the private sector. And as mentioned in one of our earlier webinar series topics, we have seen that many tools available globally for nature-related reporting, but many of them require adaptations or like small but important tweaks to fit the Caribbean social, environmental, and geographic realities. So one of the areas of impact from our work is testing these approaches or tools and localizing them within our Caribbean context. And often this means partnering with, again, our academic institutions, regulators, and even the private sector to co-develop and contextualize the data, tools, and approaches that would make sense here. The second pillar is enhancing, and this is strengthening the understanding and capacity across businesses through trainings, our private sector bootcamp, and a tailored guidance on measuring disclosure and nature-related impacts are just some examples of that. The third pillar is creating. This is about fostering a community of progressive, nature-positive actors. The fourth is facilitating, and this is bringing together, again, these partners, government, civil society, academia, businesses, to enable what I like to call the multi-stakeholder collaboration, which is needed for credible natural capital reporting and action in the Caribbean. So we operationalize these pillars through these core action areas. Again, it's knowledge, capacity, practice, and communication. And knowledge is where we generate evidence-based information. Capacity is our actions where we build skills and understanding across the private sector. Practice is where we actually put this capacity and knowledge acquired into implementation. And finally, communication is where we ensure that the progress doesn't just sit in silos. Through our communication channels, we are able to provide information to our partners to amplify learning, share case studies, and build regional communities of practice. So I just want to share with you some examples of how we put these action items to practice in a collaborative way. So the first action area is knowledge, as I mentioned, and this is where the Hub's partnership model is most visible. Through our natural capital communities of practice, we convened a multi-stakeholder working group, bringing together banks, insurance, and investment professionals, NGOs, researchers, academia, and civil society. And this collaborative structure allows us to pool perspectives from across the Caribbean and co-design the region's first assessment of how business perceived nature-based reporting. And this was actually done through our first technical working group launched last year. And what did we learn? Well, the findings show that managements in Caribbean businesses do see value in nature-based reporting. We sent out a survey and 71% believe it can be used for managing risks. 86% agreed it can improve trust and accountability. 69% feel that nature-based reporting provides better decision-making information, and 77% says that it aligns with their own organizational goals. But at the same time, these businesses were honest about their concerns. So nearly half, and I'm talking about 49%, felt that nature-based reporting could expose them to public scrutiny. So there's a strong support, but it comes with uncertainty and perceived risks. Another major insight from this partnership exercise is around the willingness of these Caribbean businesses to contribute to the regional efforts in nature-based reporting and nature-based actions. So the survey revealed that businesses are most willing to engage through knowledge sharing, participating in projects, and advocacy and awareness, and less through resource-heavy contributions like funding or even technical support. But this tells us something important, that Caribbean firms want to learn from each other, partner with each other, and contribute through collaborations and not in isolation. So what's clear from the technical working group one is that businesses need better access to data, clearer guidance, and regionally relevant tools if they are going to integrate nature into their reporting and decision making. And in response to this year, 2025, we launched a second technical working group that focused on developing the first natural capital research agenda for the region, starting with Trinidad and Tobago. So this working group brings together government agencies like UE and UTT, regulators, financial institutions, NGOs, and also technical organizations to co-create the information architecture that businesses need to measure, manage, and disclose nature-related risks and dependencies. So the group is working on four major tasks. And I see some of you here in the audience today, like CBF. First task is mapping existing natural capital data sources and understanding what information already exists across agencies and institutions. The second is to identify and prioritize data gaps, especially through most relevant to the GBF Target 15 and the TNFD disclosure expectations. The third is developing a set of high-value research priorities that can guide investment, funding, and academic work across the next several years. And the fourth is designing tools to support cooperative reporting, including the foundations of what we call the Natural Capital Knowledge Hub. But the outcome is to coordinate multi-stakeholder knowledge ecosystem, one that gives Caribbean businesses access to evidence and scientific foundations they need for credible nature-related reporting. So working group 2, is our way of responding directly to what the private sector is asking for, which is shared learning, shared data, and shared direction. Our second core action area is in capacity. And this is where we focus on building the skills and understanding and confidence that businesses need to engage meaningfully in natural capital and ESG related reporting. One of the biggest steps we took is in 2023, where we launched the Natural Capital Bootcamp for the private sector. Again, this was first of its kind in the Caribbean training program that walked companies through natural capital principles, measurement approaches, and what nature-related decision-making tools can look like in practice. We also expanded this effort through the Natural Capital Grant Challenge, where we shortlisted applicants that participated in an incubator session as well. These sessions help them to strengthen their understanding on natural capital, refining their project ideas, and beginning to integrate natural capital approaches into their business models and reporting systems. So what we've learned from these engagements, especially from the micro SMEs, is that the appetite is there. Businesses want tools, they want guidance, they want practical, accessible ways to apply natural capital concepts. So building on that momentum in 2026, we will be expanding our capacity building program, specifically targeting these micro, small, medium enterprises with a stronger focus on ESG and natural capital reporting and decision making. So for many of these SMEs, sustainability reporting can feel overwhelming and resource heavy, but our goal is to make it practical, regionally relevant, and achievable through these localized tools, hands-on training, and supportive communities of practice. So stay tuned. These new MSMEs focus program will launch soon, and we invite you to participate in this next chapter. Our final core action area is in communication, and this is absolutely essential for mainstreaming natural capital in the region. Because Even if we build knowledge, capacity, and practice, the impact remains limited if the information doesn't reach the broader community of businesses, policymakers, and even citizens. So this is where we work closely with communication allies like the Cari-Bois Environmental News Network, which plays a crucial role in elevating environmental journalism across the Caribbean. And through this partnership, we help strengthen reporting on climate change, biodiversity, natural capital, and environmental issues, and making these topics a bit more visible, accessible, and more relevant to business and the public. So platforms like Cari-Bois ensures that these success stories and challenges and even new research and policy developments are shared widely, supporting a stronger, more informed regional conversation and around nature and sustainability. So communication also includes initiatives like this webinar series as well, which bring together experts, the private sector leaders like yourself, researchers, and civil society to share their insights and learn from each other. These sessions create what we hope is a safe and open space for discussion and knowledge exchange, helping to demystify nature-related reporting and build the confidence needed to take action. So with that, I want to close and bring us back to the core message that has been run throughout my presentation here, which is the Caribbean is ready to take nature-based reporting seriously, but none of us can advance this agenda alone. Across sectors, we are seeing companies recognizing nature as a material business issue and not just an environmental one. We're seeing growing awareness, growing appetite, and a clear willingness to engage. But we're also seeing the real challenges like data gaps, limited tools, uneven capacity, uncertainty around emerging global frameworks. But this is why the Natural Capital Hub exists. And this is why partnership sits at the center of everything we do. And in everything we've shared here today, reflects one truth. Nature positive Caribbean's future is possible, but it will be built through collaboration, shared learning, and collective action. Thank you. So Tyrell, over to you. I hope my Zoom did not crash on me.
No, your Zoom did not crash. You'll get Brandon. Thank you very much for that incredible presentation and really reinforcing the importance of multi-stakeholder action, which is needed for credible reporting, but also giving us a look at how this belief can be practically applied in our region and reassuring us that working directly with stakeholders have showed you that there is a willingness to collaborate, as there is a shared understanding that building strong reporting systems will not be effective if all hands are not on deck. So I think that's a really great platform to get into the next presenter, who will show us even more practical examples of how this is being applied throughout the region. So it is my honor to introduce Mr. Saeed Ali. Saeed is the Chief Operating Officer at Close the Loop Caribbean Limited, where he spearheads national initiatives in circular economy innovation, carbon sequestration, organic waste upcycling, and land restoration. At Close the Loop, he advances a partnership-powered model that engages all sectors to scale nature-positive, community-centered solutions across Trinidad and Tobago. Saeed has a dynamic track record in project finance, stakeholder engagement, and social enterprise development, and he is driving the expansion of regenerative development pathways to commercial viability. He holds an academic background in law and is currently pursuing an MBA with a focus on business analytics. She remains committed to accelerating circular economy solutions throughout the region. So without any delay, Said, I'm gonna pass the spotlight to you and give me 1 second to open the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so firstly, I just wanted to say thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And I also appreciate all the attendees here who took time out of the day to attend this so that we could all share our knowledge on a topic that has moved from being something of interest to something that is actually very critical right now. So I think it's great that we're all here. Yeah, we can start from the previous one. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yes, it's great to be here. I wanted to start by just introducing Closed Loop Caribbean. So Closed Loop Caribbean, for those of you who don't know, Closed Loop Caribbean is a social enterprise. We're a company. However, we embed our services and products in the advancement of social and environmental development, not only nationally, but also within models that can be scaled and replicated regionally. So we could go on to the next slide. Closed Loop Caribbean started out of an issue, and it's not an issue I think that any of us here are unfamiliar with, right? There's too much waste that goes to our landfill, and a lot of them is actually what we constitute to be organic waste. So a bulk of this organic waste is actually yard waste or landscaping waste, as well as food waste. Things that, one, could be reduced from going to the landfill, and two, could be diverted into ways that can be used as resources rather than just waste products that end up as a landfill. This can be done in such a way where these materials would be seen as byproducts rather than even waste materials. We could go to the next slide. So we know the issues that comes out of organic waste going to the landfill. Organic waste releases something called methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas that is 25 times as powerful in terms of the warming effect as carbon dioxide within its first 20 years in the atmosphere. What that means is it is the greenhouse gas that is most likely to affect us within our lifetime. In addition to this, the way that we landfill in Trinidad and Tobago, first of all, we don't presently have any proper landfills, right? So we could get that out of the way. The reality is that we have dumps. And the way that we dump in Trinidad and Tobago is such that we keep heaping material on top of each other, which results in anaerobic breakdown of materials. Now, when this is done, and we do this to ensure that we maximize our capacity at the landfill, right? When this is done, that exposes air pockets where materials such as these can essentially act as fuel to stimulate things like landfill fires. And then landfill fires don't discriminate, right? So when these landfill fires essentially ignite, these landfill fires pick up all the other materials in the landfill, whether they may be organic, inorganic, plastic, toxic, etc. Right? So this is the problem that Closed Loop Caribbean was born out of. We could go on to the next slide. So at the same point in time, while all this is happening, we need to understand that there are organizations in Trinidad and Tobago that have been driving actions to try to combat this. And they've all been historically working a bit in a silo. But I think that we could all appreciate that we're starting to come together and we're starting to recognize the importance of collaborative approaches and consortium style approaches. So one of the organizations that I want to first highlight is IR Movement. IR Movement is one of the founders of Closed Loop Caribbean. And IR Movement has been using organic waste to restore degraded land since 2018, right? So this started from the IWECO project, Integrated Water, Land and Ecosystems Management in Small Island Developing States. This was a project that was implemented by the EMA and supported by the GF Small Grants Program. And one thing that we realize here, as we can see on, we can go back to that. Yeah, one thing that we can realize here, as we can see on this picture, is that the entire area is barren, but where there has just been a small section mulched, we could see such a big difference in the actual growth here. So this is something that we could see is a critical, cost-effective, and replicable way that we could actually restore degraded lands. We could go on to the next one. I think the volume. I could narrate. It's okay. I could narrate. So what's happening here is this is one of our technical consultants, Aaron Barker, and what he's showing is essentially picking up dirt from an unmulched area and how easily it crumbles because there's no moisture in the dirt, right? And it's essentially sand. Now he picks up a handful of material from a mulched area and you can see how it crumbles, but it also holds its shape because there's a good moisture content. And this is just about 6 inches away from each other, right? So we could see visibly the impact that just using organic material to mulch a degraded area can actually do, right? But how does this get into a business model? We could go on to the next one. So to introduce the other partner, this is Hello Green Products. So Hello Green Products is actually the introducer of compostable packaging, certified compostable packaging to Trinidad and Tobago. This happened about 10 years ago, right? And in tandem with that happening, Hello Green recognized two things, right? Because whilst introducing compostable packaging, they were also in conversations with the government about policies to reduce the amount of plastics that were coming in. And what that allowed was for them to get their foot in the door to start to speak to all the other policies around this material that they would now be distributing. And this material is organic. So granted that this compostable packaging is just a drop in the bucket in terms of the organic material that goes in the landfill, this is actually critical in terms of starting the conversation nationally about organic waste and the fact that there should be an organic waste processing facility. Next slide. Enter now Thompson soil. So 15 years ago, Thompson soil realized that soil, and this is as simple as it could be, that soil could be sold on shelves. This is not something that was happening before. A couple years after that now, they realized that the bags that they're putting on these shelves could be upgraded to introduce a longer shelf life. They didn't realize that what they were doing at the point in time was actually critical things as it relates to the development of organic waste diversion, recycling, processing, and ultimately development. They just wanted to make soil and start a company because they love gardening, they love farming, and they had the vision of just that, taking soil and putting it on shelves. Now Thompson soil, in tandem with everything that's going on there, were at the point where they realized that the scale that their business has reached has left them with the responsibility to ensure that the products now that they're putting into those bags with the longer shelf life must now be standardized. It must now be of the utmost quality, it must be consistent, it must be regulated, and it can be used to introduce and better development, not only locally, but regionally. Because remember, when they started, they did not realize that what they were doing was in and of itself recycling. They essentially started a soil company, right? Now, to do all that, they recognized that there was, even with Hello Green and I Movement in the picture, there was still something outstanding. There's still something critical outstanding. In order to get that level of standardized quality, in order to get that level of consistency, in order to scale this to the next level, there needs to be a serious laboratory scientific element, right? So we can enter the next partner. Next slide. Tucana TNT essentially started as the Agri-Services division of AP Scott, and Tucana TNT launched the Happy Planet Organic Farms. So the Happy Planet Organic Farm is actually the region's largest indoor oyster mushroom farms, and they produce 100% locally made, right in Arangwa, is 100% organic oyster mushrooms. And this is available at every major supermarket locally, actually. And in creating this product, they essentially employed this level of laboratory analysis, this level of technical expertise, this level of insight that would also require to translate into scaling the composting operations. So what this resulted in? Next slide. We could just press the arrow twice. Yeah. Last one. Yeah. This resulted in a model. This model is essentially an ongoing mechanism that will drive organic waste towards land regeneration to support the restoration of degraded land and reforestation, as well as towards industrial scale composting. But then we realize in doing that, in and of itself, when you're doing these things, you need to actually always be on the cutting edge and on the innovative side of things. And the reality is because you need to be solutions oriented. So if you're thinking about wanting to create impact with this, let's just say you go to an organization and you want to take their organic waste. Remember, you would have your composting recipe and it's structured. There's a very specific amount of this material, that material, etc. And it might be that an organization wants to send material to you that might be a bit different than your recipe. You might have to treat it differently. And you can't reject them, right? What you have to do is essentially look to figure out the solutions with that. So it might be that you might be getting a little bit too much food waste for your compost recipe. So now you have to look at black soldier fly approaches. You have to look at other things. And you need to understand which of these is your immediate commercial models and which of these require other things such as green finance, such as development style things like carbon credits that can propel them further, right? And I'll get into some of those in a bit. Next slide. So what happened out of that whole coming together of everybody realizing that they could play a small part in this mechanism of diverting organic waste and sending it to some form of operations, whether it might be Thompson's, with an ongoing business, fully commercial market ready operation, or whether it might be a movement who's doing reforestation that might currently be more development style, however, can have a commercial element to it if approached in the right way, such as in carbon credit models, etc. The idea is that everybody can work together in a model that would sustain itself. So everybody came together and took this model to the IDB as well as the European Union and gained a certain amount of funding to begin propelling the entire ecosystem. And you will hear me continuously use that word ecosystem. So I won't go too much into this, but when everyone came together, they realized that they needed to break up that model further because they can't just look at things like business segments, not when you're dealing with things that are development related. I will give an example. Composting might be something that is already market ready, it's commercially developed, and the next steps might be scaling it further. However, the reforestation, we can see that to commercialize it, a good approach might be carbon credits. However, carbon credits is not ready locally. It's not ready even in this side of the region, in small island developing states, or even in the English-speaking Caribbean. We haven't had any commercial carbon credit projects as yet. And why is that? Because there's a certain level of the enabling environment that has to be developed. And this enabling environment does not, just because it's not yet commercially viable, that does not mean that it requires any less technical capacity, any less expertise. In fact, it might require more. So this is where a social enterprise needs to understand where your models fall within all these different sectors, what is ongoing commercial models, and what falls into that realm of development. And that might be where you might look at some form of development funding or grant funding and so on. Thanks, man. Next one. So just to show what came out of this, on the composting side of things, we formed 20 partnerships. You see, we diverted over 22,000 tons of organic waste since project inception, and this resulted in all these dependent results, right? So we could go to the next one because I want to speak to the reforestation quickly. So just to speak to the reforestation really quickly, the reforestation, although it's not yet commercially viable, it still requires such a deep level of technical expertise that you need to look at a model that will essentially drive an industry further. And this is why we looked at carbon credits. However, we cannot do this by ourselves, which will take us to the next slide. We could go to the next one time. So who we engaged was a partner, and not just any partner, right? One of the best carbon developers internationally. So we engaged a Parla group, and if you know about carbon credits, they essentially helped to write some of the Vera standards. Sorry. Yeah, they essentially help to write some of the various standards to do a deep analysis of all the different carbon models and look at which one would allow for our model to be viable. And the reason for that is not only because the reason for that is essentially because carbon credits have historically not been inclusive to biospheres like ours. Even if you look at the current models and the way that they take things to market, the species that are on the registries, the type of soil that are on the registries, even the fact that in the Caribbean, you might have to look at projects in different areas. None of that is allowed. And you need to actually look at working with models who are open to making that change to be inclusive to Caribbean islands. So that brings me back to a level of development. Next slide. So that just to end, I wanted to just show what our ecosystem would look like today. And there's a lot more actually. But it just goes to show that in all that happening, there needs to be a whole scale ecosystem where everybody plays their part, everybody understands what is required for the next stage of development, everybody understands the model. And just to end off, a lot of people think that partnership is actually on about agreeing on everything. And the reality is that is not what happens. In action, partners would likely agree on one or two things that would drive them to work through disagreeing and anything else that they disagree with. And that is how I think that you could pick your partners because there are a couple core things that once you agree on those, you will work through everything else. So I just wanted to end by saying that.
All right, thank you so much, Said, for the incredible presentation. And I just wanted to say that it was inspiring to see how Close the Loop was developed as a direct solution to the problems of pollution and unsustainable consumption. And we need more people to step up to the challenge and to see where we can, see tangible results to protect biodiversity and ensure a more sustainable society. And something that stood out to me during your presentation was the different data points. And I think this is a really good example of an organization where we can get valuable data sets about consumption patterns, recycling, and waste reduction. And of course, this is key data to guide policy development that can not only protect the natural environment, but also show how societies are aligning their efforts to sustainability. So we definitely need more organizations like Close the Loop to close those data gaps. So moving along to our next presenter, Ms. Gillian Charles Gallop, and I really do hope I pronounced your name correctly. Sorry if I did not. You could correct me when you step up to the baton crease. Gillian leads the regional corporate banking and international corporate banking teams at CIBC Caribbean, where she also oversees the bank's sustainable finance portfolio, supporting sovereign and corporate clients across the region. With more than 30 years of experience in financial services, her career spans corporate banking, capital markets, investment banking, strategy governance, and risk management. As a part of the corporate and investment banking team, Gillian has arranged and executed over US 5 billion, wow, in financing and advisory transactions for both public and private sector clients. Her work has driven asset growth across sectors, including sustainable finance, renewable energy, infrastructure, real estate, and regulated industries. She's also an associate of the Institute of Canadian Bankers. She holds an MBA in finance from the University of Lancaster, and I hope I also pronounced that correctly. And she is certified in sustainability and climate risk by the GARP. So, not to take up any more of your time, Ms. Gillian, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Terrell, and really interesting presentations from the other panelists. Really, from what you shared and the Close the Loop presentation, there is really a lot that could be done in relation to nature capital. And for me, today's focus is really going to be on how we can translate that natural capital into action. It's not just about climate resiliency, but it's also about economic resiliency. And the Caribbean has a vast amount of natural capital that can really drive that growth and resilience in the region. And so what I also want to be able to share today as well is how important those collaborations across partners and the ability to bring forward innovative financial solutions is for what we're doing. And you definitely could see that from the presentation that came before me. So what I'll do first is, and I think the first speaker did give a little bit of color on that. And I mean, we do take for granted the share resources that we have around us, right? When you think about the abundance of resources we have, both from an ecosystem perspective and then abiotic assets that we have. And we think, for example, those ecosystems are going to be there forever, but the truth is that they are depletable, and they can be destroyed with climate impacts as well. And so knowing that, and knowing too that we don't really take the value of them into account. So for example, in corporate balance sheets or national accounts, the value of these assets aren't taken into account, and we don't see the benefits of them, especially when it in terms of resiliency, for example, coastal resilience, or storm protection or carbon storage. We don't really see those benefits until something serious happens. And so it was good to hear just now about the work that the hub is doing, and larger financial institutions across the region and larger businesses are doing more in relation to bringing that in. And I think IFRS international financial reporting standards are more and more bringing that to the fore for an obligation to report it. But recognizing that they are major economic drivers is really important. And if you think about that from a broader regional context, I know Trinidad's tourism industry is not as significant to the other to Trinidad as it is to the other regions, but a major part of that natural capital impacts tourism with the coral reefs we have, the beaches we have that generate billions of dollars for our region, as an example. The opportunities for blue or green credits when we develop the infrastructure resources that can help that is also the potential. And really and truly, as we see that potential being developed, we can see how much real value can be created from those that natural capital that we have. So the other thing I wanted to then share is how we can actually, sorry, I don't think my screen has moved. Can you see it, the change? Good.
Right. Ms. Gillian,
and I think
I'm sharing the presentation. I'm not sure if you're seeing it there.
Hold on. Yes, I am.
Yeah, so you can just let me know next, and I will change the slide.
Next slide on understanding natural capital.
Yes.
I wouldn't go into that in too much detail because I think the first presenter spoke to that. But basically, when you think about the natural capital that really is our resources across all of our regions, and what it does for us, not only coastal protection, but water purification and carbon sequestering, as well as pollination, just as an example. These types of things really demonstrate and underpin the economic activity and human well-being that natural capital actually provides. And in the Caribbean, as an example, when you think about what we depend on, like tourism, like fisheries, agriculture, where preserving that capital isn't just about an environmental protection, but really about the economic necessity of it. And we need to ensure, as was said earlier, that the collaboration across all stakeholders are really vital to that we transform that natural capital into strategic assets that can actually have real long-term economic value. not for us here today, but also for our future generations. That's really the important message I want to share in relation to how those opportunities, when tapped, can create climate resiliency, inclusive growth, and long-term competitiveness for the region. Next slide. Yeah. And so valuing those capital assets, I would say, is really important for us in terms of when you think about what policymakers and businesses need to do, and when we're able to understand the value of those assets and what they can actually do in terms of whether it be recovery, acting as natural barriers, and even sometimes reducing insurance claims, that can help us make some really informed decisions that can help us prioritize the conservation and sustainable use of those natural assets. And when you think about those benefits, which is risk reduction, increasing healthy ecosystems that can mitigate things like climate-related hazards, the revenue generations that could be afforded, like the mechanisms that was just mentioned, not just blue carbon credits, but even just the utilization of actually then being able to monetize soil and biogas and all those types of things. Those are potential new services and revenue generating avenues that are really left untapped. And if you think about the Caribbean as a region, especially the English-speaking Caribbean, we don't do a good job in terms of developing our circulatory businesses. But that alone is an untapped area, because a lot of that not only gets dumped into the country dumps, the national dumps, but it is actually an asset as well that can be monetized, like you did with the soil and the composting and things like that. So there are opportunities that we're not utilizing, that if we look at other regions where they've actually created entirely new sectors that can support growth and economic and create economic advantages. Next slide. And so our topic that I really want to focus on is how we can drive sustainable growth. And that one slide that you shared earlier, which really looked at all of the different types of opportunities to finance that you can use sustainable financing. What we have seen in the region so far in some of the big story transactions, the ones that we have done at CIBC Caribbean as well, tend to would have been mainly in the marine environment. And then you recently saw in 2024 where we did the one with building sustainability with and addressing the water scarcity issue in Barbados. But there's so many other ways that we can deploy this, not only in our marine environment, but in our land environment, in our forests, in our plants, and whatever it is that we have that we can consider as potential for opportunity and investment. So you mentioned earlier the importance of collaboration, and I would say financial institutions, multilateral development banks, and development finance institutions really will play a pivotal role in helping to scale those investments in natural capital. First, knowing how we value it is going to be important, but then knowing how to then turn those assets into economic value is going to be really critical. And being able to then leverage sustainable finance instruments such as the green bonds, the sustainability-linked loans that you mentioned earlier, and creating blended finance structures in partnership with those agencies, as well as potentially impact investors or philanthropic agencies that want to do the right thing. And by de-risking projects, those multilaterals and the DFIs actually help to attract the private capital to support those initiatives. And the other thing that they do, which you also shared, is that it also helps to scale up, that those partnerships can help to aggregate small scale initiatives and help them to really scale up so that they become bankable transactions. And when that scalability happens, it not only reduces cost with the benefit of these enhancements, but it improves access to funding to smaller businesses that may not necessarily have had it without the benefit of those development agencies or multilaterals. And the other part that is really important, which you demonstrated, and I'm glad your presentation came before mine, because another big area that's a gap, and again, our human resources is natural capital as well, but we have gaps when it comes to technical capacity in this space. We're still very new to it when you compare to other regions. And so being able to bring technical assistance to the fore, that will help us to mobilize the resources themselves and bring the financing together is really important. So, and then when you think about our institutional frameworks, our structural frameworks, which are still, there's still policies and legislation that's dating back hundreds of years that need to be brought up to speed. All of those things are creating challenges. And so the technical assistance that they bring, the capacity building programs that they bring, help to support the project preparation. They build into institutional strength, not only within the government agencies that need to support this, but also in the private sector. And when those structural frameworks are developed, that can support things like transparency and enhancing the financial viability of those nature-based projects. And it also helps us to align with international frameworks. So, for example, the Task Force for Nature Financial Disclosures and the other frameworks that the multilaterals adopt. And I want to just point out here, for example, if anybody listened to or caught up with what COP30 had, while there was a lot of negative about, the fossil fuel aspect was not addressed, there are two really positive things that I think that we need to look at. And one of them was the Forever Forest facility that Brazil launched, which is meant to reward countries in creating or maintaining and restoring tropical forests. And I think that's a really good thing because I think there are about 70 countries when I looked at it that actually qualify for that. And that could benefit a number of countries. But think about how we can invest in our natural capital like that. And it doesn't have to only be forest trees, but what about our fruit trees that help to deliver food to our communities, right? And at the same time, also protect and act as carbon storages. So there's so many ways that we can drive these initiatives forwards and use the support and the examples that I'm going to show can be scaled up, can be replicated in different spaces and different sectors to help us to drive and accelerate the action that is needed. And the last thing I would say here is that when we then embed and align with those global frameworks and are able to put KPIs into the financial products, help institutions be able to provide incentives to businesses to adopt these practices, it can really drive systemic positive change to our markets. And at the same time, governments as well need to look at how do we make it more rewarding for private sector to really get on the bandwagon and get with it. And the way they can do that is by providing incentives. And those incentives mean that you're bringing private sector capital into creating the avenues to support better economic activity and improving your climate resiliency at the same time. Next slide. Okay. And so quickly here, I just go through this one very quickly in terms of making these projects bankable. Obviously, there are some things that need to be done, and you that case study you made gave us a perfect example of how you can create a revenue model and how you can monetize that capital. Being able to address the governance and the risk is important. And as I said before, those risk-sharing instruments like guarantees, like insurance products, can really enhance a project attractiveness and bring private sector capital to the fore. Being able to bring third-party verification as an example, when you're building out a framework, whether it be for biodiversity credits or blue carbon markets, any of those things, that third-party verification can actually boost investor confidence and say, okay, I can see the framework, I can see the transparency, I can see what and how it's going to be done. And the reporting standards help to ensure that that person knows that if they're investing in something, there's some validation and certainty and comfort in what is being provided. So when we adopt those approaches and then we bring in those blended finance or those sustainability linked loans or use of proceeds types of facilities of transactions into play, by combining both concessional and commercial capital, it really will help to overcome things like the barriers that relate to scale, to liquidity, to risk issues that prevent investors from taking into considering investing in these new, what I would call new to market sectors, which are new to market for our region, but have been demonstrated in a lot of other spaces. So the case studies I shared are really focused on, I call them the 3Bs, Belize, Barbados, and Bahamas, where each of them would have done the work, had what I would call the political will to make the changes that were needed in their legislation, in their frameworks, get everybody in their team on board to really drive this forward. It also shows the importance of the collaboration across the multilaterals and the development agencies. And when I mentioned philanthropic organizations, the Nature Conservancy came into play here because they really are trying to drive that, and they have been able to do it. They first did it in Seychelles, they did it in Belize, and you can see from the different case studies how you move from Belize as an example, where the debt for nature swap they did was like 500 million. And then they went to Barbados and did $150 million. And then the next iteration of that for Barbados, when they did the first 150, they came back and did something totally different, but at 300 million. And then Bahamas came in, when I'll show it to you on the other slide, came in and did another $500 million transaction. So there is scalability on this. And like I said, this does not necessarily need to be only at a marine environment or blue economy level. Taking those initiatives into perspective, you can replicate that once you put the structure in place. And there's something I like to speak to, because I think it's important to advocate for the change. Sustainable frameworks are really important for at the country level and at the organization level, because when you decide and you determine and you bring all your stakeholders together and say, okay, what is our priorities? What is it that we want to invest in? It helps to give you clarity on what you're going to focus your efforts on, but it also then gives the market an opportunity to see what you are focused on and what it is that what are the opportunities for them to invest in, what are the private sector able to come in and say, okay, I know this is going to move forward because there is stakeholder interest in wanting to move this forward. And then that framework, coupled with moving forward the institutional frameworks, the regulators, all of the persons that help to make this thing happen, it is so important that that institutional and structural framework is strengthened, and the transparency, the governance structures are implemented to ensure that when whether it be a regional or international investor comes into the market, they understand what the playing field is like. They understand because it is transparent. There's a clear ease of doing business, and there's a certain level of trust and accountability that can be developed in the space to ensure that that person can feel comfortable to invest, while also addressing the risk issues, because those issues, things like political risk, all of the things that are covered under political risk are issues that prevent investors from investing. So with this one, when you look at it, I tried to break it down into these specific sectors. Nature capital overview, what it was that was covered. In both instances, generally and broadly, it was around marine environment and coastal protection and conservation initiatives. The impact for both instances was 30% protection of 30% of the ocean one by 2026 and one by 2030, and based on a marine spatial plan. And what that does, if you read about the marine spatial plan, it's not just about biodiversity protection, but it's also being able to assess what is the economic opportunities that I can have in that space, and being able to determine what's high biodiversity, what's low, which areas I can commercialize. And then that was built on a legislative and structural framework. So before they could go into these transactions, they had to make some changes to the legislation to ensure that that governance framework was there. And then the mechanism was, in both instances, blended finance, blue bonds, blue loans, and then the conservative funding or the savings in both instances really helped to support a longer term plan for that conservation. And then the bankability part, which is really around how were the risks mitigated, the credit enhancements from DFC, the insurance wrap from there, the Nature Conservancy taking on a first loss, and then all of the other sorts of what I call belts and braces that were put in place to ensure that the project was bankable, and private sector financial institutions felt comfortable to come in and invest and say, look, I'm comfortable that these risks are covered. And I would say, by the way, both Belize and Barbados at the time they did it were not investment grade, right? And so that is very, very important as well. And then when you think about scalability and replicability and alignment to the UN SDGs, you can clearly see the impact, the scalability, and the ability to be able to take this roadmap and move it into another territory. And that is what, after the Belize, they were able to do Barbados. And then next slide, if you move on to the next slide, you can then see how Bahamas was able to then replicate that using their significant, and Bahamas does have a significant seagrass and what we call carbon capture or carbon sink with their seagrass meadows. That has been valued. They've actually valued those. So that's a perfect example of where they have valued their natural capital and they can see the benefit of it. And so the first one was being able to do that debt conversion for those savings to redirect it to conservation and climate programs. Again, there was an endowment fund and a conservation fund to help support that. They had to change their structural and legislative frameworks to ensure that that was aligned. And again, blended finance, credit enhancement. I forgot to mention in both the Barbados transaction was the first one where we brought in a disaster and pandemic clause. And if any of you have heard about the Bridgetown Agenda, a lot of that is captured in there, not how that can help support national economies in relation to a significant disaster or pandemic event. The second Bahamas transaction, actually, if you look it up, is a very, very recent transaction. It's literally, I think I saw the announcement, if not last week, this week, where they were able to, what they're aiming to do with their natural capital is actually get blue carbon credits. And to do that, Cap Strategies, which is a capital markets house, it was able to put in the first 25 million in a senior debt to help mobilize this opportunity, which will then move into a potential $500 to $1 billion transaction in the future. And that's a huge opportunity. And the Act, when you talk about the National Investments Funds Act, really does enable the potential for them to either create a carbon trading platform on their own stock exchange, or potentially be able to exchange it on global platforms. And so both of these, while they target the marine environment, just think about if for Trinidad alone, the opportunities that may be there for it outside of the energy sector, where Trinidad can start thinking about how you diversify the economy, which is something that is much needed as well. And then you can then see the types of UN SDG alignment as well. And all of these things then go towards these countries' nationally determined contributions and being able to get to those the targets that they set under the Paris Agreement. So I'll stop there, open for questions. But main and key message here is that for us to be able to achieve what needs to be achieved in the Caribbean, it needs all hands on deck. It needs the support of the private sector. The public sector needs to really come on board in terms of at each country level, they set the stage and the temperature, and being able to accelerate activity needs the political will of the powers that be, not just the current government, but those that are not in government as well. I would say the people in waiting, so that they sign on to that. And when they come, if any power change happens, they stick to the script. They stick to the, I'm not doing this for the next 5 years. I'm doing this for 10 years forward, 20 years forward, 50 years forward. Because everything we're doing here now really is going to be impacting our future generations. And that is something that we really need to recognize. And the time to do it is now or yesterday, to be able to get it done.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for that very insightful presentation. And I think what you really reminded everyone this afternoon is that there is a lot of potential in the region to drive sustainable growth and green financing. And I love that you would have highlighted the gaps in achieving that, with one of them being, technical and human capacity to achieve that potential. And I'm sure that that can be filled by collaborating with other stakeholders in the private sector and civil society space. And I think, it is also inspiring that we are doing things in the region that can be used as a model for other countries around the world, which I think truly ties back to that conversation of recognizing the Caribbean as being a region with potential for growth, and we just need the right partnerships to be the catalyst to achieve that. So I know that time is very valuable, and I really do appreciate that everyone have taken time to join us today. So I'm just going to ask our presenters to just, what would be your takeaway for attendees today? If you could leave one message as we wrap up the webinar. I'll start with in the order we presented. So Brandon, then Said, and then Jillian.
You putting me on the spot, huh? So I think one message that I hope can emanate from my presentation today is a future where Caribbean private sector can adopt these nature-based frameworks is possible, but effectively, this can only be done through collaboration, shared learning, and collective actions.
Said?
Yeah, thank you. Once again, I wanted to reiterate Keisha's sentiments of thanking the Cropper Foundation for hosting such an insightful session. If there was one thing that I would like attendees to take away from my presentation, it would be that if we're thinking impact, if we're thinking operationally, if we're thinking how to actually action things, partnerships must be done in such a way that each partner is allowed to lean into their strengths, right? So you don't go to your operators and ask them to do a whole set of technical administrative work. You keep them involved, you keep them engaged at all points in time, but you allow them to lean into their strengths to be the best operator that they could be. Similarly, the technical persons who might be working on grants, might be working on the development, financial development, all these different things. You can't now tell your operator what to do, how to go about their hiring practices for their staff, how to do all these different things. You need to trust your operators, and likewise, all parties need to just trust each other and understand that an ecosystem only works when everybody maximizes on what their role is.
Thank you for that, and Jillian.
Thanks. I'm going to be very brief because I think both Brandon and Saeed has said it. I think it comes a lot to recognizing that to get this done needs collaboration, and also that we need to accelerate the action. I'd say these are the two things. And how do we accelerate the action? Each one of the organizations here can play a part by looking inwardly and saying, what is it that I need to do? How do I prioritize? What framework do I need to put in place at my level to be able to get on the program and be able to make a change? And then the second part I would say is advocacy. The same way we here are advocating for this change, you need to do the same as well, because it's going to affect you, it's going to affect your children, it's going to affect your grandchildren. And it just makes sense for us to be able to move forward and accelerate and create economic opportunities while strengthening our resiliency in the region. So there's lots of pluses for us to take this forward powerfully.
Thank you so much for that, Jillian, and thank you so much for that comment. Keisha, we could certainly, attest to the fact that Anti-Merchant Bank has been an exceptional supportive partner of the Copper Foundation and work like this around the region. And as we learned this afternoon, CIBC as well as Close the Loop. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us this afternoon. Look forward to email recapping this afternoon. The recording will also be made available to everyone, and look forward to our next email, our next upcoming webinar. So have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful
Thank
day.
you. Bye.
Thanks, Terrell. Miss Carol here. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you as
Bye.
always for the support, Ms. Carol.
Enjoy. Interesting as usual.
Yes, thank you.